Hello, hello, and welcome to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Today, I want to take a little bit of a different approach to the series as a whole by looking at the speedrunning categories that have come out of Mario Kart Double Dash. Now, as you know, my personal rules at the moment are itemless, multiplayer, and in general, just play the game to have fun. But speedrunners have taken this game to an art form. And this is something that comes up consistently in video games as a whole, is that there are the casual enjoyers, such as myself, the challenge runners, and the absolute mad lads that are speedrunners. Speedrunners are known for effectively doing anything and everything to truly showcase just how far the game actually can go. Now, according to speedrun.com, which is one of the largest databases of speedrun videos and archives throughout the entire internet, um, Mario Kart Double Dash actually has multiple categories. Each category falls under a specific race, or sorry, a specific cup, as well as whether or not it was a glitched or glitchless version of the cup itself. Glitches, for the sake of simplicity, are any unintended shortcuts. This includes the this includes like a mushroom bridge shortcut where you can throw yourself off the bridge and still get a lap. But most of the time, these are performed glitchless. Now, within this, Mario Kart Double Dash's whole, I suppose, outlook is that it has to be performed at the absolute highest proficiency, and the glitchless categories have, I suppose, two major rules. One is there can't be any glitches, shortcuts, and that the use of multiplayer is banned. Now, initially I was questioning this, but it does make sense. If you're going for a uh, run in and of itself, multiplayer being banned just means that certain mechanics don't work the way they were intended, such as mini turbos, which are the outright bread and butter of every single one of these runs. Now, back in, I believe it was 2006 to 2008, when Mario Kart DS was released, we ended up with a terminology for a skill that was necessary for high-end runs called snaking, where a racer would go from one mini turbo to the next as quickly as possible to keep their speed at absolutely ridiculous levels, uncomparable to anything else prior. Now, Mario Kart Double Dash has this as well, although I feel like a slightly lesser extent. By tapping L or R to get yourself into a drift, um, putting your joystick either to the left or right completely and back to neutral two separate times, you can get a mini turbo. The mini turbo, you can tell you are ready when the sparks at the tires change from yellow to orange to blue. And oh, that was unfortunate. Um, the result is that we end up with a small increase in speed. But overall, that's pretty much it. Now, current world record runs of Flower Cup fall into glitched and glitchless categories. Now, most of these categories didn't end up starting to get r- religiously tracked until 2015. Um, I'm assuming part of this is just because this um, history is hard to track in the early days. At least that's my understanding of it. But the initial runs that they started really digging into were about 10 and a quarter minutes. In the case of the Flower Cup itself, it continued to be improved about every 7 to 8 months by about 30 seconds after 2015. The current world record is held by an individual going by Young Rick with a time of 7 minutes and 35 seconds. And reality is that this glitchless category is just end-to-end fun understanding of the fundamentals and showcasing what a player can do at its heart. And so I have no doubt in my mind that this individual is probably a far better Mario Kart player than I will ever be. Having the hard part about this is that each individual course has, I suppose, unique challenges tied to it. And the fact is that I don't believe that I could ever make a world record, but it is interesting to know that the world record is as close as it actually is to what I am passing around, or to what I'm doing. But I think something that needs to be mentioned is we are now at the 7 minute mark, and I haven't touched the final race yet. So, this individual was so fast and so consistent that they were done by the time that I start the final race. And that is an impressive feat in and of itself. But, as I'm sure you've noticed, we're only halfway through the video. And that's because we oopsied. And I want to make this kind of a bit of a common statement here. Nobody is perfect. And we opted that if an item were ever to be used, that the cup would be considered null and void. That we would end up resetting the entire attempt of this particular course as soon as anything happened. And I stand by that, because unfortunately, things happen. And so, we're going to make sure that we do this in the most reasonable way possible. And, hey, Daisy, no. And so we begin again. Back at Mushroom Bridge. Somehow we ended up replacing Baby Ouija with a turtle and a dinosaur, so that's all fun and games. We are sitting at about 8 minutes into the track as a whole, or into everything as a whole. Now, the other major statement about this, about speedrunning, is that the runs on speedrunning.com are specifically raced on 150cc. Nothing higher, nothing lower. So, I believe that this is simply for consistency's sake, as tracking, 25 different categories would be absolutely absurd. But the other side of things of it is that Mario Kart Double Dash is an an incredibly diverse game, and actually one that, for lack of better terminology, has always been incredibly adept and incredibly unique as far as the franchise goes. Um, it took until approximately 2015 for shortcuts of Mario Kart Double Dash to be discovered at all. And part of this is because shortcuts on Double Dash are incredibly hard to reach because of the fail-safe system that they have. Um, Mario Kart Double Dash's fail-safe is as follows. A cart has to start each lap at checkpoint 0, which is directly on the other side of the starting line. 2, the cart cannot or must pass all gates, which is to say there are somewhere in the ballpark of 50 to 150 checkpoints on every single track. And every single one of these checkpoints must be interacted with in some capacity before the player can reach or can be considered a new lap. And the third is that in the case of out of bounds tricks, if more than 50% of a lap is traveled at any given point in time, that player will, or it will revert back to 0. So if an out of bounds situation happens where the player is, let's say, in the first half of a lap and goes out of bounds and the game doesn't know where to put the player, it'll put the player back at the beginning of the track. But because so much of the track was skipped, it reverts the amount of the track completed back to 0. Effectively meaning that any progress that was made makes the track itself a null and void and impossible to follow up with and complete that lap without doing the entire lap over again. Now, in terms of glitches, the biggest ones are that shortcuts are allowed, as well as golden mushroom abuse is also allowed. So what that means is that they call it Z-Tech, which allows the player to get a golden mushroom, use it, swap characters, and swap back, and continue using it without the timer ending up, without the timer on a golden mushroom running out. This is a relatively important facet of it. And runs that do not include glitches of any variety are, of course, disqualified from that category. Now, once the first batch of glitches were found, the initial time in 2014 was 9 minutes and 27 seconds, which is a pretty decent timeline. I think that it holds its own as one of the more consistent runs. However, that record changed on a monthly basis, almost daily basis for a while. Stacy1199 reduced that record by an entire minute 27 days after the run had become official. And the exact same day reduced it to 7 minutes and 50 seconds, or 56 seconds, which is approximately 1 minute and 20 seconds faster than the initial run. However, Goomba, who is known as one of the best runners of Mario Kart Double Dash in general, managed to get the time down to 7 minutes and 36 seconds in early 2016, just over a year later. This time was continued to be improved over the course of 2017, down to 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, the record would be held by Goomba for the next 3 years, only being beat by Itemless in 2020, and only improved the record by a total of 3 seconds for a time of 7 minutes and 27 seconds. This is, in and of itself, impressive nonetheless. The current world record passed hands between Goomba and Itemless twice since. Once back to Goomba with a time of 7:22 in July of 2020, 2 days after Itemless took the record back. And it took Itemless a grand total of a year and a half, specifically November 11th of 2021, to improve the record any further by a grand total of 3 seconds, bringing the official final time down to 7 minutes and 19 seconds. And this is actually a really impressive feat in and of itself. But the reason being that this becomes as consistent and as impressive as it is because these players have taken the time to actually best themselves on a day-to-day basis to really show what they are capable of. Heh, baby Luigi got burned. And that's the beauty of Mario Kart and really speedrunning in general, is that there are many different ways that one can go about it. Every single course has both the most insane, I could do this faster by doing this mentality, and pure non-stop understanding of the game. That is ultimately what we are aiming for. And I believe that in the end, speedruns are just a showcase of pure... I'm sorry, what? I just dodged a blue shell. How? Anywho, it is a act of love of the game to speedrun it. I didn't understand growing up that speedrunning was primarily by players who have played the game start to finish, and their entire goal was to show just how far this one game that they loved could be pushed, to show just how fast it could be done. Because when you've done everything, well, how fast can you do it? And that's really the beauty of speedrunning in and of itself, is it showcases, admittedly, all the little flaws and cracks in the game, but it also showcases just how far and how dedicated a fan base is willing to take their games. Anywho, we have now completed the Flower Cup 150cc, adding it with the Mushroom 150. And I think we're looking pretty healthy right now. I believe that given that we were able to do it at this point, the rest is soon to follow. Anywho, if you like what you see, drop a like, leave subscribe, be good to one another, and we'll catch you next time. Until then, have a good one.